I have Cameron Ruffer here with me today on the podcast, and I'm grateful for you to be here with me today, Cameron.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me on here today.
Well, and I just I'm so thankful for you to come on here and share your story. And I know you've been working with your foundation now for a few years, and I know for our listeners, and it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not, it's heartbreaking to talk about the loss of a child. And I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story of courage and strength and what you and your family have gone through and are building in your daughter's memory.
Yeah, it's something that we've always really chosen to be open about all the way from when Callie was diagnosed with her heart defect up and through all the treatments and surgery she had, and then even after she's passed away, being kind of open and honest about what it's like to join the club that nobody wants to be a part of. And that's a phrase that parents who have lost children, whether unborn, stillborn, or even years into life, they understand that club. And again, it's interesting because you meet people who maybe have gone through a similar type of experience, and they just know. It's one of those things that's hard to explain to someone because you don't want anyone to have to live through it. But once they have, you kind of connect in a weird way. Not a bad way, just a different kind of way.
Sure, sure. Well, Cameron, let's kind of start there. Take me through. Can you share a little bit about Callie and the impact she had on your life and your family's life?
Yeah, of course. So we've got three children now. One up in heaven, obviously, with Callie, who we're talking about here today. My son Kaiden is 9. He'll be 10 in December this year. And then actually have our little girl Renly, who will just be 4 months on the 6th coming up here in November. So we've been blessed with her and blessed with all of them, really. But Callie was special from very early on. We call her that because of the special heart that she had. Um, we became pregnant after a little bit of fertility issues with Callie. Kaiden was all natural. Callie had to go through about one round of like the shots that they do. I don't know all the technical medical terms that my wife does. Some people might identify with that. We got lucky after one round and we were pregnant with Callie. At the 20-week ultrasound, we had to go in for an additional scan. And I'm always like, okay, they're just double checking stuff. My wife had the intuition already kind of going on. She's like, something's not right. And so we had that additional scan and learned at that point that she was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS. And, it's funny when you learn about those kinds of things because you know ahead of time. So at the 20-week mark, there could all be all these plans made. We look back on it, it's like, well, maybe we wouldn't have wanted to find out because it kind of quote unquote ruined the pregnancy, right? There's not a whole lot to look forward to other than her getting here and then everything that has to happen intervention wise once she's arrived. But we've also talked to people who weren't able to find out because it was missed at that 20-week scan. And they're like, man, I wish we would have known. And so I think it's one of those deals like, you're not going to be happy either
Sure.
way because learning news like that just isn't news you ever want to hear. But she was born, and what's really incredible is that if you wouldn't have known by us telling you or you seeing her in the hospital or anything like that, she was a really normal girl. I mean, she liked girly girl stuff. She liked the princess outfits. She loved playing with her brother. And she really had just a thing about life where she just went along and did her thing. If it was time to go to the hospital, we'd go. If it was time to have a surgery, she'd have a surgery. And honestly, her condition didn't, it impacted her, of course, right? There's certain things that we had to watch out for health wise, but really she did everything that she could to be a normal girl. And if she walked down the street and we met you on the street, you wouldn't be able to tell that she had anything wrong with her until you kind of could pull down her shirt and see that huge scar of her three or two open heart surgeries that she had. Um, what's really interesting that we kind of observed from her is she had just like the highest pain tolerance, right? And she had to live through all this stuff knowing nothing different, right? All these needle sticks, all of these procedures, all of these strangers that she wouldn't, meet otherwise, coming into the room, poking, prodding, asking for things. And I specifically remember one instance where we were staying in the hospital and she had to get blood drawn through, I think, what's called her PICC line, which is a kind of a large needle that goes in her thigh. And she had to get that reset. And after they were done, she even like told the nurse thank you through tears. Like just she was that
Wow.
kind of a girl. Like she didn't know anything else. And so to see that kind of infectious zeal for life with what she was dealt really inspired us to, think, well, her loss can't mean just nothing. We believe in God, and we kind of prayed through things. And my wife, Kristen, had gotten kind of the hope of starting a foundation in her memory and in her honor. And it's kind of continued to grow through donations and through events and through just kind of hearing from different people about what we could do, and getting donations online and events around our community. And even when I was in Columbus talking to some people, we've gotten some decent donations from individual donors. And so it's hard to sum up in a short amount of time like the impact that Callie's had on our life, mainly because when people meet us, they're like, well, you're how are you the way that you are if you've lost a child? And I was like, well, I can't say that I can take credit for it, because again, I believe in God. And I think that a lot of it has to do with, I view it now, not why was she taken from me, but how happy I am that I had any time with her. And so I look back on it pretty fondly.
Yeah. And what a lesson from a baby into a toddler that we can take. I'm sure you think about it still to this day with the couple of examples you just gave of, how grateful she was and just went along with it no matter what life was throwing at her. So thank you for sharing that. Cameron, you mentioned the nonprofit you and your wife have started. I believe it's called Callie's Giving Heart. So what inspired you that made you want to start the foundation, and how has it helped you cope with the loss of Callie?
Yeah. So when we were in the hospital, so we had a unique situation where we moved. Let's see, Callie was born in July of 2018, and we lived in Marysville, Ohio at the time, so only a short 40-minute drive from Nationwide Children's. Callie was born at Riverside, and then I got to ride in the biggest ambulance I've ever been in on a nationwide kind of, they call it a mobile NICU, from Riverside with Callie over to Nationwide Children's Hospital, where we received care for the first roughly 18 months of her life. Through different procedures and whatnot, we did those all at Nationwide, clinic visits, those types of things. And then we chose, okay, we want to move back to be closer to family. I grew up in a small town called Archwold, Ohio, in the northwest corner. And Versailles, where my wife grew up and where we live now, similar small town. She had a little bit more family around the area. And so we decided, well, we're going to go to Versailles and kind of put down roots, right? What happened is that Versailles happens to be about equidistance from Nationwide and Cincinnati Children's. And so we had learned a lot about what Callie had, and Nationwide was doing excellent care. We have nothing bad to say about them. But in these types of really severe cases, it just felt like we owe Callie the best care possible. And so we went ahead and arranged a visit to Cincinnati, saw their program that they had for what they call single ventricle patients, which Callie was that, and ultimately decided to move care down to Cincinnati. And so what we experienced actually in both hospitals kind of struck us. We saw a lot of kids, a lot of infants, babies in beds and in the rooms in the NICUs, or the CTICUs, cardiothoracic intensive care units, and not many parents, which was kind of heartbreaking. And so we got to know a lot of the nurses. We spent about 63 days total inpatient, not consecutively, over the course of Callie's 3.5 years. And through different conversations with social workers, nurses, doctors, etc., learned that a lot of times either parents can't afford to be off of work, have traveled from a long distance and can't travel regularly to be there with them. In some instances, it is just parents who maybe don't have the wherewithal to be there with their child, even though maybe they want to, they just can't handle it. And so what we wanted to be able to do was help others kind of like us. So, there's all kinds of different government programs and nonprofits for perhaps what you consider low income families. And then, you've got kind of the higher income demographic that is able to manage these costs fairly easily because they've just been blessed that way. But then you kind of have that messy middle where we kind of fell. We were able to save for various stays and plan for those accordingly because you got to eat, you got to have the basics when you're there, and it does cost money when you're not at home, of course. But if a stay went much longer than we anticipated, one of our stays was almost 30 days, which is a very long time. We were like, okay, this is getting a little tough. And when people would ask, hey, what can we do for you? I said, we got to eat. So here's the Venmo. If you feel called in that way, it's really the best way to kind of help us out right now. And I'm a pretty outgoing guy. And so when people came down to it, I'm like, well, if you're asking, here's what we're saying we could use. And so when we saw that, we wanted to try and help those similar type of people who are really trying to be there for their family. Maybe there's some extenuating circumstances that, I got to make my car payment, or my cell phone's going to get shut off, those types of things that we really wanted to help with. And so what we decided to do is partner with Cincinnati Children's actually off the bat and talk with their social work team and ask, hey, what are these actual kind of physical, real needs that need to be met? Because something that we experience while they're in hospital, a lot of different either families or kind of nonprofit care organizations will send a stuffed animal or a kit of toys, things that are very good, but we got a lot of those. And we're like, where's kind of the material stuff that needs to be handled, right? The paying of a mortgage, the paying of rent, paying of insurance, helping a family not have to worry so much about everything happening outside of the hospital so they could focus on their child inside the hospital. And actually, Cincinnati Children's told us that they don't have a lot of nonprofit partners that focus on
Wow.
those things. And so we're like, well, that's going to be it. So that's kind of where the impetus came from for what we do with Callie's Giving Heart.
Wow, that's and what an amazing mindset. I know you said you're a man of faith and it has a lot to do with it, but what a amazing mindset that you were able to shift it um, from yourself and from what you guys were carrying on your shoulders to put that out there for other people. Was that something that took a while to kind of to change that mind shift of like, how can I turn this into a story of helping and putting, or was it just immediately you just felt that no, that I have to help other people in this same situation?
I think for Kristen and I, we've always been folks, or at least try to be folks that really want to help other people regardless of our situation. Sometimes to a fault, and we're trying to work on that where we're almost, too giving of our time. But it wasn't long, because even while we were inpatient, the social workers or nurses might ask like, "Hey, we've got another family. They're just being admitted. They're understandably nervous, scared, don't know what's going to happen. Would you be willing to talk to them?" And the answer was always, of
Wow.
course, because if we've been there and we can help someone else go through it with a little less anxiety, or at least some understanding of what's going to be coming, we're happy to do that. That's kind of been our nature in life and what we try to do, which is why I've always been pretty open about the journey that we've been on with Callie, her diagnosis, her passing, and then starting the foundation.
Okay. And then what's the mission of the nonprofit as it sits today? Is that what you guys are doing with raising funds to assist with families that are doing those long stays, be it gift cards, be it monetary donations, be it, grocery assistance? How's the mission of the nonprofit working today?
Yeah, so what we try to do, our tagline is we want to bring families together to heal hearts. We do that through three different opportunities or avenues, if you will. And our mission is supporting families through monetary funds that are needed while they're inpatient. Second is kind of funding research around congenital heart defects and how they can kind of be what we hope eventually extinguished. They don't even come into this world. They're doing all kinds of surgeries of in utero surgeries where they can help repair a heart and that types of things. And then third is kind of the community education, right, and raising awareness. So the family financial support, research, and then awareness. Those are the three avenues that we focus on. Our biggest program overall is the family financial support. And what we do is we partner with hospitals, typically hospitals that treat more severe cases. So currently we're partnered with Nationwide Children's, Cincinnati Children's, and we are partnered with now a hospital out of Texas. The name is leaving me at the moment, but this is all listed on our website at calliesgivingheart.org. And the reason we have established partners is because we partner with the social workers off the bat, and we help them kind of help them understand what families we're looking to support, so that then they can kind of make those recommendations for us because they nominate a family. We kind of review what's going on, what the diagnosis is. We don't get into a lot of medical detail. We just basically say, like, we want to help families that have congenital heart defects impacting, what's going on in their lives. And then those social workers really are the best avenue for the families because it would be just another pile on situation if we said, oh, hey, family, you've been in the hospital for, 7 days, 10 days now. Go ahead and go out and fill out this huge application. We're like, let's have the social workers do that. That's what they're there
Sure.
for. And so that's how we have started to kind of really build out our footprint on who we can support and partner
Okay.
with.
And so as you meet these families, Cameron, are there stories that you've learned or people situations that maybe took you by surprise that something you didn't have to deal with? Or is there stuff that you're still learning about, other people's needs and the families that are suffering from going through this?
So, what's interesting is we track a few demographic pieces of information kind of around government assistance, Social Security income, some of those programs, just for our knowledge when we're making decisions. And what's interesting is some families who might qualify for some of those programs, actually, when the child is hospitalized, a lot of those funds go down to very low amounts. What may have funded an entire rent payment during, the regular course of living, once that child who qualifies for those government assistance payments goes into the hospital, they drop to nominal. I mean, you talk about maybe six, seven, $800 a month going down to $30 a
Wow.
month, right? Because they're in the hospital. And that's not helpful because, well, how are they going to pay those bills? And so that's been kind of eye-opening to understand that a little bit more. And then also to just the dedication that some parents will have to try and make things work, right? We've seen stories of, okay, well, grandma's staying with the kids, so mom can be at the bedside, and then dad has to work a little bit to help pay some bills, but he comes after work every day. And those are the families that are like, yeah, we got to support them as best we can because they're the ones who are trying to make this work. And then, you have the other side of that coin as well, which is sometimes sad to read about, where you might have they're more concerned about getting back to work. We don't necessarily sense that family connection as much. And so we try to help them the best that we can. But really, it's that dedication to the family perspective that we love.
Hmm. Hmm. And so when you start the nonprofit, you start the foundation, and as it scales and you're building and you're seeing the impact you're making in people's lives, what challenges did you face while you're building this nonprofit, and how did you overcome them?
So it's a good question, Michael. So let's see. Let's get back to the time frame here. So Callie passed away at the end of 2021 in December, and I was actually had started interviewing for a VP role of an organization about 4 or 5 months prior to her passing away, and had already worked out the details of starting January of 2022 as a VP of operations for a software firm. And I was like, well, this is really terrible
Yeah.
timing. And, of course, in that kind of a situation, just made a bunch of new relationships. They were supportive, of course, but I didn't have a lot of, deep relationships with any of those employees or coworkers yet. And so still started kind of my normal time frame, which was only about maybe 3 weeks after the memorial service. And probably looking back, mental health wise was not a good choice, but learning about myself every day in that area. And so I worked there for about uh, 8 months, and then they only hit about 40% of their sales targets. So they really couldn't afford to keep me on. So I all of a sudden found myself without a job, only 8 short months after my daughter passed away, which is kind of a pretty strong blow. But that was kind of a godsend in one way because it afforded me a lot more time to actually focus on the foundation, getting it off the ground. Starting a nonprofit is not a simple task. I've talked to a few people now to try and get them in the right direction, get them going. There's various types of nonprofits, different structures to set up, legal documents that have to be constructed, applications and the fees along with them that have to be submitted to the government. And so that was one thing as Kristen's like, let's do this. And while you're off work, focus on getting this done, kind of turn it into that passion project. And, again, just stepped out on faith and said, okay, I'll continue applying for jobs and looking for stuff. But it was at a really not a great time back in 2022. Job markets have been soft ever since, honestly. And it only took about 3 or 4 short months to get everything done, where I've heard people say, it's taken them a year to try and get a nonprofit off the ground. And even our application was approved in record time, from what I understand. So that was kind of a challenge, but also an opportunity at the same time, right after, Callie had passed away within a year, having lost my job.
Yeah, that's well, the timeline of that, starting that new job right after, I can only imagine. But as you said, the silver lining that came along with the job loss 8 months later, do you feel that that was you were able to connect then that next 3 or 4 months after as you started building the nonprofit? Was that were you able to kind of reconnect to Callie's memory and kind of maybe grieve a little more that you didn't quite have a chance to when you started that new job?
Totally. And I think even for those times in that new job, I was somewhat, stifling the grief response, which I kind of have handled that and gone through some counseling sessions, which again, I am open about it and I encourage. It sometimes is something that men don't often think about, but it's been a huge help for me to, I don't anymore, but for probably about 6 to 8 months, I was having regular sessions just to kind of talk through everything and process
Sure.
that. And yes, indeed, like you said, Michael, once I wasn't being distracted by kind of office work, every day on my computer here, there was days I just sit here and, all of a sudden I'm crying out of nowhere because I hadn't really taken the time to let the grief move through me appropriately. And now I have. And there's still times that'll happen. I mean, any parent who loses a child will tell you 15 years later, it can hit you kind of randomly too, right? And I expect that the rest of my life. But it definitely was even a silver lining there to have that kind of time to process and grieve appropriately.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Cameron. Is I talk a lot about this with I feel like in this past year or two in my own life with a lot of men don't feel like they have that green light or they can be transparent about grieving or you can just be in a room and one day start crying and thank you for the vulnerability and be willing to talk about it because that's a part that I think a lot of people expect the mom to grieve, right? She's the one that gave birth to this child, and rightly so. It's just sad for the entire family and siblings and uncles and aunts and grandparents. But a lot of times, the dad I think is supposed to step up and be strong. And I don't think we realize that being strong is what you're doing today is being human, and showing that it's okay to express those emotions.
Yeah, and Kristen and I really supported each other back and forth on that. One thing that we kind of talked through is, you want to ask the question, are you okay? Well, no,
Yeah.
like you're not okay. And I kind of thought through that a little bit. I told her, like, well, what if we just start asking each other, do you need anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, can I get you
Mm-hmm.
anything? So that was kind of our way of asking, are you okay? Without actually asking it. And then also being able to kind of, do an act of maybe it's a cup of coffee or just give me a hug or that kind of stuff. And that was really useful in kind of actively moving through grief as a couple. Like, hey, can I get anything for you? Do you need anything? And it might be a simple nope. And then you learn, okay, they'll be fine. Or it might be a yeah. And, it could be a breakdown or it could just simply be let's talk for a little bit.
Sure.
So that was really neat to kind of experience together as a couple.
Yeah, I love how you reframe the question because, yeah, of course, right? And people continue to, are you okay? Well, no. To reframe it of what can I do for you? How can I support you? Back to the mission, the foundation you guys have built. Cameron, are there any stories? Is there a story of a family that sticks out that you guys have helped or children that have, positively been impacted by the foundation?
So it's kind of the aggregate of all of them. So what we do, one of our big, not necessarily big events, we really started our main event right now that isn't necessarily even a fundraiser. I call it a kind of a thank you event. We have a pool party each summer here in Versailles to just say thank you to the community for all they've done. We started that even before the foundation was officially formed. Actually, some of the money that people said, hey, we want to donate to you, we actually used some of that money to seed the foundation. We were just saying thank you for being there for us through everything. And so then some of that money turned into actually the foundation seed money. And this past year, which would have been our third year, we added in a piece where as you walked in, there was signs of and pictures on those signs of different families that we'd supported. And I guess I kind of lost track of how many we've been able to support over the years. Um, And if I recall a stat, I think we're probably close to over $25,000 worth of support to families since inception. And that's simply, bill payments and that kind of thing, right? Car payments, phone payments, all that stuff. And um, it's not necessarily one family. It's the fact that they're doing the best that they can with what they have. And then we're like, hey, yep, you're doing great. Let's keep going. And so we try, our average grant size is anywhere from about $700 to $1,200. Not huge, but not tiny. And it's just been really good to be able to spread that out. We wanted to give enough that it made a difference, but not, like we can provide everything that they need in one sitting.
Hmm. No, that's got to feel, I mean, like you said, when someone says, well, how can you help? Especially when I can imagine the 30-day stay that you guys had, and you had several. And just for someone to reach out, a stranger to say, hey, I've been there. It's $700. It's $1,000. Here's a rent payment, a mortgage payment, a car payment. Here's groceries. Like it's got to be just the love they probably feel. Again, from a foundation, from a stranger that they didn't even know this was coming. It kind of drops out of the sky for them. So, Cameron, with that said, and these parents that you're watching them go through what you did, what advice do you give, or would you give to parents who not only are going through this, but those who are going through a loss of a child as well due to something like this?
So everyone's different in how they process things. Again, my wife and I tend to be very open, talk things out with each other, share with friends, ask for input from friends, from family. But I think that was a huge way to make sure that we didn't slump into anything for too long, regarding grief or hopelessness. And I would encourage even those who might not be, you don't have to share a lot, but just say, like, I'm not doing so good
Hmm.
today. And just kind of share that that challenge is happening, whether you name it for yourself or for someone else in the room that you might be talking to or sharing with. That was something that was really big for us. And know that you are not alone. That's, of course, a very common thing to say for any type of situation that's challenging from a depression standpoint or a health standpoint. But know that even in your specific instance, no matter what it may be, you're not alone and you're not the first, most likely not the first to go through it.
Hmm. Yeah, the isolation, I bet at times is unbearable, and as you said earlier, the mental health component is definitely something to be aware of, and so I think it's got to be so helpful. Again, back to your foundation, and then these people receiving financial support, they got to know that it goes beyond that. That you're thinking, hey, I've been there, I see you, and I can I feel the support. So roughly, then, how many families do you interact with throughout like a calendar year, let's say?
So we don't necessarily directly interact with the families. We do kind of review those applications that the social workers have submitted on their behalf. But with this pool party that we did, actually, Kristen did reach out. We obviously keep a database of, excuse me, who we've helped. And she did reach out, to the family contact that they listed on the application and asked, are there any stories you'd like to share, pictures you could share because of this pool party? And so typically we see anywhere from about 2 to 3 applications a month, but lately that's been even closer to 5 to 6 applications a month with having new hospitals coming on. And so, I mean, do the math there, you're talking 50, 60 families a year that could be receiving funds. So that's been really cool to see. We're getting close to November. And so actually, I think Giving Tuesday actually falls into December this year. We're trying to figure out what kind of campaign we like to run to continue to raise funds. We do have a few, very few sustaining members that, kind of give some donations, which is nice. We had a very nice gift from family friend out of Columbus that has helped us set up some investments that can help us keep moving forward. But we're always looking for, what's the right next thing to do. We approach everything with an attitude of gratitude. Again, I mentioned the pool party. We say, thank you for doing what you do. We don't always want to just knock and say, hey, can you give us money? Because it's more so who feels called to. And we know that as long as we continue to trust in our faith, that the Lord will help this grow into what it's supposed to be.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, Cameron, I appreciate you sharing your story today, and I will absolutely be putting the foundation, all the information, the website, any social media outlets, for Callie's Giving Heart Foundation in the show notes for our listeners to have an opportunity to learn more and, of course, donate. But before we go, I have two final questions for you, Cameron. The first one is, what's one thing you've learned about yourself as you've gone through this experience?
I think something that I've learned about myself is that you don't know how you're feeling until you take time to feel it. And what I mean by that is, like I explained kind of the whole job situation. It took probably a solid 3 weeks of my wife saying, "You're not okay," until I finally was like, "Okay, if you say so, but I seem fine." And it's one of those things where you have to almost kind of remove yourself and be like, if people that know me best are telling me I don't seem okay, then I'm probably
Mm,
not. And so I need to take the time to feel that. And that was a big realization for me.
wow, yeah, that's a lot of awareness there. And, Cameron, on this podcast, a lot of times we talk about, and your story is no different, of, hearing the whisper of a dream, of a daydream. And sometimes it comes from a place that we didn't know, a position we know we'd be in. And certainly didn't know, just a few years ago that you would be in this position. But you kind of followed that whisper to start this foundation, as not only, respect and memory of Callie, but to help others. So my last question is, what advice would you give to someone who is hearing the whisper of a dream or a path in life that just seems too crazy to chase?
I think it's the best thing to do is to take it one piece at a time. So it's not like I was trying to figure out, well, how much money do I need to raise to make this thing work before I can even get there? It was like, okay, I got to fill out this application question and then check that. All right, now I got to fill out the next one. Now I got to figure out how to submit it. Now I got to figure out where I'm going to get the fee money to, make sure it's finalized. And then it's going to the lawyer to get everything structured. And it was just one step at a time, because you accomplish dreams a little bit at a time, and before you know, it's like, holy cow, this is what we talked about. Now we're here.
Yeah, it's little bits and pieces every day. I love that.
Yep. Yeah.
Cameron Ruffer, thank you so much for joining me today. Callie's Giving Heart Foundation. Again, we'll put all the information in the show notes. And best of luck to you and the foundation in the future. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. You have a
You
great
too.
day.